Friday, September 6, 2019. My name is Judy Herrera, and I'm in Camarillo, California. It is my honor and pleasure to interview Edgardo Vasquez on behalf of the Conejo Valley chapter of the DAR and Colonial Dames 17th Century for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. This interview is being recorded by Ed Lynch from Advanta Videography and contains the reflections and memories of the veteran during his time in the Army. This is Edgardo's story. Edgardo, you were born in Laredo, Texas, almost 90 years ago to Pedro Vasquez and Carlota Ortiz. You were their third son, with a baby sister, Eldelia, rounding out the family. You attended Martin High School in Laredo, earning certificates in their ROTC program. You excelled as a tech sergeant, familiar with drilling, marching, and giving orders. At 17 years old, you wanted to join the Army like your older brother, Pedro. Do you want to pick up your story there?
Yes. My brother had returned from Germany, and he was a platoon engineer putting bridges across the Rhine and stuff like that for the tanks to go by. And I admire him because he was also a photographer. He took a lot of pictures. He taught me photography. So I volunteered as a freshman. I went to and volunteered to the Army. At that time they said, thank you very much for and on my certificate it says regular Army, because I was not drafted.
Mm-hmm.
So I had distinction of actually have volunteered. At high school, I learned automotive. I learned mechanical lathe and metal sheet, how to bend metal sheets.
Wow.
During my childhood, my mother had a lot of wisdom. She says, Eddie, tell me who your friends are, and I'll tell you who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So because you learn everything from your friends. I was so happy that my friends were highly mechanical, and they built engines and motorcycles, and I picked all that up. So I have a very mechanical mind. So when I went to the Army, I took Army Fort Worth, California. When we finished, there were some other people from Laredo that were. When we finished the basic training, we had I think about a month or a few days. We rented a taxi from Fort Worth, California, to drive us all the way home.
Oh no.
And I forgot the name of the car, but it's a brand new car that they don't make them anymore. And so we had a personal driver, and he stayed around Laredo. And
oh gosh.
so
you were only 17, so yeah. How did you get into the Army at 17?
Well, I was going to be 18 in September. So I went in August, and my mother signed that it was okay.
Okay.
And here's a very interesting story. My mother was a highly educated lady, and my father had died when I was 13. Oh. So I said, good son, I was sending $25 a month home. Well, time went by, and when I got to Korea, they sent us right to Korea from California directly to Incheon. That was in the occupation forces, and the 7th Army picked us all up. And the train was open train, and the windows didn't have windows. But anyway, Korea was cold.
Cold.
Oh, it was so cold, because I'm from Texas. And they put us in a large barn, and they said, on my microphone says, listen up. You have a choice to go to the infantry, quartermaster, or military police. Make up your mind. When they call your name, you go up front and you say
Oh boy.
which branch you're going to. I had learned and did some research that ordnance is where they do maintenance for heavy equipment.
Okay.
So when they called my name, I went down there and says, what branch of this you wish to go? I said, ordnance. He looked at me, didn't say a word. What he said, go back and sit down.
Ooh.
I thought I was being rejected or something. But at the end, a truck from the 707 Ordnance came and picked me up, and we went to a compound that was maybe 1 acre wide cap, or 2 acres. Well, anyway, there were all the trucks, and we had our own compound. Our building was out of concrete, and it was steam heated.
Oh.
Our shower, our dining hall was downstairs, all heated, and the only time that it was cold, we had to go outside and work on the. I was repairing electrical systems on the trucks.
Okay.
But the sergeant, I think he's from Oklahoma, he took a liking to me, and they called me to the office. It says, Vasquez, we like for you to work here in the office. You're going to be the CO driver, and you're going to do the mail clerk.
Uh-huh.
It sounds good to me. And again, I had memory at that time. I could remember everybody's name. And when I sorted the mail, I could remember who got mail, who did got mail. And I had special privileges with the cooks. I go to deliver the mail, special delivery to the cooks at work, and they'll cook for me.
Ooh, okay.
I could have early breakfast or early lunch.
So Army chow was good for Ed.
Oh, yes. But that was the first time that I had experienced a rolling earthquake. We were standing in line to go eat, and then all of a sudden it was an undulation movement. The earth went up and down and up and down, like a carpet. You could see the earth before the wave picked you up and let you back down to normal. Then the next wave came up.
Oh.
And that was the first time I have ever experienced a rolling earthquake. That was in Japan. See, the 707 ordnance. I was in the occupation forces.
Right. After
Between wars.
Okay.
And excuse me. Then what happened? The whole division, the 707 ordnance, the whole 707 infantry division, got moved to Japan.
Okay.
And since I had a good hearing ear and language ability, I started learning Japanese. So when we got to Japan, I became more proficient and found out that Japan is very phonetic. The vowels are the same like in Spanish, a, e, I, o, u, same as in English, but that's how you pronounce them. The enunciation is the key. So like you can say Yokohama, you can Yokohama. I could spell it in Spanish, and you could read it in Japanese. But I got so aggressive that I did learn the first basic written Japanese characters, the katakana they call it.
You met up with a friend. You had a friend from
yes.
with you, right?
Yes. Before we left Korea, my friend from Laredo, he was stationed at the 707 Ordnance because he was a specialist in optics. He repaired telescopes and lenses and stuff. That was his training.
Okay.
And Nick was already into radio back when.
Wow.
He was a smart guy, so we stayed together. Oh, while we were in Korea in this compound, I like photography, he liked photography. We hired a Korean guy to develop the pictures, and we would print them there in our own studio for the people, because at that time they'd bring the black and white film, and we'd develop it and print them and what have you.
Oh, wow.
So we had, that was how, oh yes, they found out in Korea that I had art abilities. There was an amphibious vehicle that they called the duck. It was a terrain vehicle, but it had a bottom that could go into the ocean or rivers and float with the same motor would drive. So they asked me, they say, would you please paint or draw a Donald Duck on the side of the... So I did a Donald Duck in color, and they liked it. He says, it is good. He says, he would put the little knuckle on the Donald Duck. I said, I go by sight. If that's the way it is, I can duplicate what I see. So anyway, that was it. Well, once we moved to Japan, is Sendai. Sendai is up north. The island Honshu. Honshu is the main island of Japan, and above it is Hokkaido. It's the most northern island that is Japanese. So in Sendai, I was still the mail clerk, and we could go to special services and get a shotgun and go out. Oh, we bought a 1945 Harley Davidson motorcycle. So Nick and I went in together, and we had it overhauled and painted in maroon mirror color. You know, the Japanese drew a beautiful job, just like a lacquer maroon.
Yeah.
And we would go out to the country and shoot ducks. Somebody says, how can you shoot ducks over there? He says, well, during the day, the ducks go out to sea, and then they come back just before sunset, flying low.
Oh.
So you wait at the beach as they come in and shoot the ducks. And we met up with a family that had a fishing boat. They were fishermen. They had a boat that had a one cylinder, and they would go out and fish. So they would cook for us and spend the weekends. Nick and I did not smoke.
Mm-hmm.
So our cigarettes went as trading material for food,
Oh, good.
or lodging, or whatever. So then the time came that I went to headquarters to pick up the mail, and then I could go to the mail because it was open mail. It was directives that they had, and I looked at one of the directives. It says schools are open in Yokohama for radio school. Oh man, I said, Nick, let's go to school. Yokohama radio school. He said, that's great. So I went and knocked on the door. Captain Brown was his last name. Yes, Vasquez. I said, sir, I would like to apply to go to radio school. He says, yes, very well. We will send you to school. Then my buddy followed. They say yes. Well, when we got our orders, Nick had orders to go to Yokohama radio school. My order said, go to code encryption in Hokkaido.
Oh, no.
Coding and decoding messages, and they had a machine that you change the date and the time and the hour, So I was a cryptographer.
Okay. Oh.
So we came home when I figured, Hokkaido was called.
Mm.
Came back to Sendai, and they said, Vasquez, you have the choice to stay 6 more months in Japan, or you can go home pretty soon.
Mm.
I had time. I wrote my mother, I have the option to come home now or 6 months later, because I wanted to wait for Nick so we can come home together.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And she sent me a telegram.
Oh,
I wish I would have
telegram.
kept. She sent me a telegram,
Oh,
and it says, Ed Vasquez. All the telegram, I wish I had it, but it says, come home.
no.
That was the message, come home. Her signature was C.O. Vasquez. Carlota Ortiz Vasquez, but just the C.O. Vasquez. Well, in the Army, C.O. means commanding officer. So I showed it to my buddy. He said, my commanding officer says to come home.
Oh.
So I came home.
What happened to that motorcycle?
Well, Nick kept it
Oh, okay.
because he stayed behind.
Oh, okay.
And what happened? I reported to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas, and I was assigned to the directory center where they have the large IBM cards of everybody in Fort Sam Houston, the Brooks Chemical and the Brooks Medical and everything, the whole complex of Fort Sam Houston. Everybody was like a post office. We had, and I would receive calls. Again, my mind was still active and I could recall names. And up to now, you tell me your last name, I said, yeah, there's just quite a few there. That's a rare last name, you know. But anyway, they'll call and I looked them up and they said, this person is at this phone number or this division. So it was an information center. Well, it came time for me to start processing my discharge.
Okay.
So I proceeded to go to the dispensary and all this, to clear out my books or whatever. And that night, President Truman announced, everyone now in the service will remain another year of service. So I went back to the barracks and they all laughed at me. I said, well, that's it. I tried. I mean, well, since I had already processed, the next day they called me and gave me my discharge.
Oh, okay.
So, because the war has started in Korea, my friend Nick was in transit from Yokohama to San Francisco. Halfway, when the war broke out, that transport ship just made a U-turn and went to Incheon and dropped all the troops over there.
My goodness.
I would have been with him.
Yes.
He got blinded by sulfur bomb, but he recovered.
Oh, good.
And he came back to Laredo and he didn't feel comfortable. He says, I'm going back in.
Oh, okay.
So he enlisted, he became an officer,
Okay.
a warrant officer in Korea. So he is a smart individual. But we have kept in touch.
Oh, nice.
We have kept in touch. And then I was in Laredo now. I went back to yes, since I went to, when I was a freshman, I didn't get my diploma, but when I came back, I went to junior college and they gave me a GED
Right. Yeah.
diploma,
Uh-huh.
but I enrolled. And my brother, Pete, the one that I admire so much, he had a brain. He had mastered the English language and nothing but A's in English. He knew all the verbs and the structure of. And anyway, the English teachers, oh, you're Pete's brother. Yes, he's good. I said, I said, I'm not that good. Well, anyway, I stayed two years there, and a company from Fort Worth, Texas, were calibrating the electric meters at each home in Texas because an electric meter is a measuring device. Anything that's measuring device has to be accurate according to the law. At that time, the electric meters had magnets, and those magnets got weaker and just didn't give you the proper reading. It had a jewel, a ruby jewel at the bottom, there's a disc in the shaft and it spins around. So this company taught me how to disassemble the meters, and there's some meters that are very complicated that they keep accumulating time and measurements. So I learned just like a watchmaker. So I developed that skill. So I worked for that company going from town to town. There were 5 of us, the supervisor and the other. And what we did, we pooled our money and we rented a house.
Oh.
One became a cook, the other one became a dishwasher. But that's the way we survived it.
So what year are we at now?
Well, it would have to be 1950, 51.
Okay.
Yes.
51. Okay.
And the Texas Meter and Device officer called me, says, Ed, there's a company in Big Spring, Texas called Texas Electric Company. It goes all the way from Fort Worth all the way to El Paso. It's a big company. They need a qualified man like you to calibrate the meters there. Okay. I said, I remember. I said, they have discrimination over there. But that's the way it was. I mean, facts were facts.
Yeah.
And this says, they don't care about you. You can do, they want you. I said, well, if they want me, okay. So I was something special there.
Oh, good.
And I worked there for 5 years. I was in the meter department. We installed primary meters. There's meters that measure your house, but there was a lot of oil fields. And how you measure those, they can have a meter in each pump at the wells. The primary lines, the primary feed lines that enter the fields, we put transformers and current transformers to measure the current in ratio, and we install primary metering. So I did that for 5 years. The officer of the company said, Eddie, I'm building a merry-go-round, and I know that you have skills in drawing. I'm going to make a merry-go-round. I'm a mechanical person, he says, and this platform is going to go around, but I want you to draw me the panels, the cow jump over the moon and this and that. So I did that. But one thing that I'll never forget, and it had to happen. I went to a little dinky restaurant. It was one of those, a hole in the wall that you enter one door in a long line and you sit there in that. I was in full uniform from the electric company, you know, by name and everything.
Sure.
And I sat down on the table, And the owner says, I cannot serve you. I said, really? Yeah, I had been to Korea, I've been around the block. And I said, I don't understand that. I said, I've been in the service, and you say no, and I said, I can serve you. And he had 2 sons. I said, Mister, those 2 sons, I hope that they don't get that treatment that you're giving me, rejecting me, you know.
Because you were of Hispanic
Yes,
descent?
yes.
Wow.
And there's another story, because those are true story lives.
Yeah, sure.
When I first came to Big Spring, I stayed in the main hotel, and I looked at the ads, and there was a room for rent. So I went to the brick house and what have you, elderly man and elderly lady, and I said, I'd like to have a room. I'll be working for the electric company, and which is just down the street. I said, oh, that's nice. I said, but I'm going to go eat right now. So before you leave, give us your name. So I went and ate, came back, and I came in and says, Ed, I'm sorry, we cannot rent to you. I said, no. I said, it's your house. I understand. I've been around the block. I can understand if that's how you feel or whatever. It's your house. I said. So I went to find another place right behind the Baptist church because I'm a Baptist.
Right.
Well, the Sunday that I go to church, there's those same people in the church.
Oh gosh, so Christian.
Oh yeah. When I first started at Texas Electric Service Company, I used to read a lot of the popular mechanics and popular electronics, I believe. And there was an ad from International Correspondence School about electrical drafting.
Yep.
So I wrote him and enrolled. And then the electric company there in Texas says, you're taking an electrical drafting test. Says, Eddie, here's the keys to the office. You can come in or stay here and work at night on the drafting tables so you can do your work.
Nice.
And when you finish, you can, we'll pay for it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
So they did gave me a
A diploma, very
diploma
nice.
from electrical drafting.
Very nice.
So I went up in grade there with the company.
Right.
Of course, I was up. There's this Mexican here that he's climbing up the ladder.
Good job, right? Good job.
And he's been in the army.
Yes.
So anyway, I excelled myself. I did marry my wife there, my first wife. And when my daughter was born, I said, I don't think so. I don't want her to grow with it, knowing what discrimination is, you
Right.
know? And so we decided to come to California. But we had come to California on a trip to see my sister in Guanimi.
Oh, okay.
We drove all the way down.
Mm.
And my brother-in-law says, Eddie, you have quite a background in electrical. Why don't you apply for the Navy? I said, later. He says, but I'm going to stop at Los Angeles, Edison. I went up to the Edison building and went up there.
Okay.
And I knew which department to go. And they saw, I say my resume, that I was a first-class meterman. He says, yeah, we'd like to have you. They open up the distribution map. It's a big map of the electrical map of all where they serve California. And I looked at the map and I saw, oh my goodness, I forget the name, Yosemite National Park.
Oh, that's right, yeah, yeah.
I said, I'd like to be stationed here at Yosemite National Park. Yes, Eddie, everybody does. But when you come to work for us, you have to join the union. And then as you go in the union, and we put, according to your skills, we put ads that are advertised in Alhambra, wherever it is, then you can transfer. I said, okay, thank you for the information. I said, just say when. Okay, I'll let you know. I drove down to San Diego, and in San Diego, I had no time to go to San Diego Gas and Electric, but I got on the phone, I knew which department to call, and I explained to the supervisor there. He says, yes, we need you, you can come. I said, I'm running out of time. Would you please send me, give me your address, I'll send you my application,
Yes.
and we want your information.
Sure.
So, San Diego Gas and Electric, of course. I said, you work for who? Texas Electric Company in Big Spring, Texas. So one went to my home and one went to him, to my supervisor.
Oh.
Beautiful. I mean, I was well known, well liked, and he called me to his office. I got the letter, Eddie. He says, you're making a good move, Eddie. He says, as good as you are, you'll never make a supervisor here.
Oh.
And he says, it's just not the time.
Yeah.
You know, everything goes by time of your life.
Sure, so true.
So I said, well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And I got an award and everything.
So you moved your family to San Diego then, after?
Yes, we moved, we drove right to San Diego Gas and Electric. And I moved close to the office. And it was a Navy crew, because I parked I had a 1957 Lincoln.
Oh.
And I had a little, my furniture, my things, and a Navy guy, a chief, Navy chiefs, helped me unload the thing, and said, now come in to have my house and have some sandwiches and stuff like that. I started to like, I started to like California.
Yes.
And so then, eventually, my brother-in-law kept saying, Eddie, apply, fill out an application for the government. So I did, and he took it to his supervisor. See, he was working in San Nicolas Island. It's an island off the coast. The supervisor read it. Says, "Well, your brother-in-law is how did he say it? He's eloquent and knows what he's doing, but I want him to glorify it some more because I was just
Build it
facts,
up.
just
Yeah.
facts."
Embellish it.
Embellished. That was the word. Embellished. So I did. So they called me from employment at Point Magoo, and I was highly rated, really. I was first in line, whatever they had. So I applied for electronic mechanic and said, Mr. Vasquez, we don't have any openings for electronic mechanic. We have opening for electronic instrument mechanics, which paid more.
Oh.
Would you like that? Yes.
Of course.
So we moved to Port Hueneme, and the only commitment that I would have to go first as I joined civil service to serve at San Nicolas Island. My brother had given the resume to his supervisor who was in radar, and I thought I was going to radar. But when the plane landed at San Nicolas Island, Mr. Roberts, FM Roberts, met me. He says, Mr. Vasquez, you're coming with me. We went to a brand new building that they just put up with 4 antennas and tracking satellites and everything. And we tracked all this, telemetry was the, telemetry is like telephone, telegraph, telemetry like a EKG.
Oh.
The missile is sending the EKG of what is happening in the internal system. The flight time, the direction, the road, everything, the fuel. And that's encrypted. So we put it on the tape. Oh, we could also read out, if they ask us to read out information, what the missile is doing.
Okay.
So we did that.
Where were the missiles coming from? Point Hueneme or
No, they were launched out of
Vandenberg?
Vandenberg en route to the Marshall Islands, 5,000 miles.
Oh.
They'll fly over, they lift off from Vandenberg telemetry, recorded it, passed over San Nicolas, recorded it, and then the envelope was big enough that when he got close to Hawaii was also recording it.
Oh, okay.
But when he got to Kwajalein could get the reception while he was up in the air. Once the line of sight for telemetry is just on the ground, not more than 10 miles over the ocean. So they called me because they were opening an airborne telemetry system, Super Constellation aircraft that were configured to do airborne telemetry.
Oh.
We would fly down to the Marshall Islands and get our radios, communications. We would hear launch, and 21 minutes later, 5,000 miles away, 21 minutes later, the missile will arrive at the impact point.
Wow.
At the impact point, the target area was half a mile circle. Underneath this circle was hydrophones. Above the surface, we would drop sonobuoys that would detect sound. So when the missile came into the target, they triangulate and find out exactly where in that half a circle how accurate it was.
Hmm.
They were so accurate. From what they say where it would be, that's the spot that they would hit.
Wow. What year are we talking? Where are we at now?
Well,
in the timeline
let me see what I have here.
I'm just wondering.
From 1962 to 1979.
Okay. Okay. Wow.
And the P-3 aircraft, when they operated the P-3 now, what was so exciting, I always remember this. Remember that our antenna was up in the upper radome. The aircraft would be turning, facing the incoming missile, you know. We know where it was going to land. And we would back up to arrive 3 miles from splash. And we will record the last 8 minutes of flight. At the same time, photograph all the re-entry, because they looked like flares coming in. And if the flare continued to glow all the way to splash, it survived. That means it's a good vehicle to use.
Wow.
But at one time, we got word that the missile launch was erratic. It was heading down toward us.
Well done.
What they didn't know whether it was going to be left or right or short or long from our target points.
Wow.
The plane commander came back to me and says, Eddie, get ready to meet your creator. And he was combing his hair. We just stayed on course. We survived that one.
Oh my gosh.
But it was really well. And one of my final ones, before I retired, I was elevated to test conductor. From the GS9, I went all the way up to 12, GS12. And I got my certificate as a test conductor to operate. I could use the range and use all the facilities. I would meet with the contractors to what they wanted to be done as to their missile or what, and we'd get notes. I had the capabilities to call the engineers, scientists, anything that I had at my disposal to meet the requirements that they wanted, and then we compiled all that and then formulated tests for them. So once the test was done, I would write a T-minus 1 day, 1 day. We had a time schedule to do. And of course, the last one, as a test conductor, Ronald Reagan gave the name to the Peacekeeper. It was a reentry vehicle like that back here that could carry 10 reentry warheads. So it was a peacekeeper, all right. And my assignment was to get some divers because they wanted to recover the booster of the they wanted to recover the booster 50 miles
Right
off
here.
range.
Yeah. So they had to pull it out with a helicopter if they could.
Well.
They had to find it.
No. The thing was, it was like a large turbot bottle, open at one end, and it would float. And the Navy divers would go there and put flotation, but it was taking on water so fast that by the time they got there, it would sink. So a company came and said, we have helicopters that we can lasso it out of the water. I said, what?
Whoa.
He said, I said, he won't pull your helicopter out of the sky. He says, no, once we snag it with our lasso, it stays taut. We just keep a taut line, not pull it out, just wait, because it's heavy with water too. And it's going up and down, it's so fine. And once it drains, they'll pick it up and bring it to the launch pad. So it was one of the most exciting things that I had done as a test conductor. And they used to call me Fast Eddie because I was very resourceful. They needed something. See, the military can only operate military lines. I could operate civilian lines. And one time we needed a special bolt for the aircraft, and I went and found a lathe man that knew how to make us a bolt that size, and so we saved the mission. Here's one that's very interesting. By then I was promoted to go down to the control center that the Army had, and to do I could go flying with my aircraft, or I could stay at the control center. At the control center, they had a green light and a red light. They want to call, is the range, well, is the range clear, yes or no? Is the radar ready? Yes. Is the telemetry ready? Everybody, all green lights. Everybody, that was the status board. making, be sure that the operation's on track. One time, they got a call. They called the Russian, because there was Russian trawlers also always at Splash Point recording what we were doing.
Oh,
So they
wow.
called the Russian to move out of the range. Also, the other part about when we had worked with Apollo 3 and Apollo 11. It was only about 50 years ago when they went to the moon.
Right.
But when they went to the moon, they came back on a capsule, and the capsule splashed southeast of Hawaii. We were there on an aircraft recording the re-entry of the capsule. And what was most interesting is that we recorded the re-entry in telemetry, but once it went through the burnout period where there's no communications, there's a silent period. When it enters the atmosphere, the capsule splashed down on the ocean, and they were floating in the ocean. Then they started transmitting by radio. We were flying overhead over the capsule and recording their voice communications. And we were retransmitting directly to Houston. So they had real-time information. During this time, there was an aircraft carrier, and the divers came to put flotation on the capsule to keep it capsule afloat, and then they took him to the aircraft carrier. So that was one of the most interesting parts of our lives. I did record the voice, but that tape got lost somewhere, many years. But yes,
Exciting.
we were with John Glenn in the beginning, even from the beginning of, and we went down to Cape Canaveral, and they were having problems with the chutes. You know, they have a booster that goes up, and those boosters come down in the parachute. They were having the problem with chute deployment, so we sent our video crew to record it as it opened up, and they were able to detect what was the problem. And one of the very sorry
It's okay.
that was when the explosion happened. I was right behind the counter watching another test conductor on the screen because we were in a loop. And once we saw the erratic bloom going different ways, it was a disaster. They kept our planes to fly low to see any debris or anything, but it was a
Tragic.
very sad moment in our lives.
Right.
But-
So altogether, you flew about 24 years aboard those Super Constellations,
That's right.
and then when did you decide to retire?
Well, I wanted to retire by age of 60. I could have stayed longer. My wife said that, and I got too early. But I did miss my work. But it was time for somebody else to move in. You know, I mean, that's the way it is. You gotta let go and let somebody. But it was also an honor for me to be one of the first Hispanic test conductors in the base. They had never had one.
Nice.
Obviously, I had the ability, and it was very, very rewarding. Like I said, they used to call me Fast Steady because I was passing the frame. Later at the on, they said, not so fast steady.
Well, even in retirement, you stayed busy. You want to share some of your activities and?
Yes, well, Dorothy and I got married at Santa Barbara Church, And our honeymoon was in Jalisco, and it was very wonderful. When we came back, we bought a motorhome. We traveled 16 years in the motorhome, 3 times across the U.S., and we went to Alaska, Labrador, and since I had mechanical abilities, I fixed that motorhome to be reliable.
Good.
I put a big, large oil filter, a large gas filter between the tank and the motor underneath it. And I could change it and have clean fuel to the motors. One time it was clogging up, and that was it. That's the only trouble we had at our motorhome. And I'm proud that we had a drain plug on it. We were out in the middle of the desert, and a guy in a motorcycle said, "Mister, do you have any gas?" I said, "Yes." But we were able to get open the valve and give him some gas, So it was a good time living. And
Well, tell us a little bit about the uniform that you have on today.
okay, oh yes, when we retired, we went to Hawaii, and I did some work. Oh, they called me. Civil Air Patrol,
Okay.
Air Force Civil Air Patrol.
Right.
And as a senior citizen, my job, since I was in radio communications, I engineered the communication radio there at the building, and I put solar panels for power.
Nice.
They had a generator, so I put solar panels, so we had emergency power. The power failed, just switch a flip it with it. And my job was to teach the young cadets voice communications, proper procedures, and that was very enjoyable. I'm still inactive, I'm still enrolled, and enjoy that. One story goes back. When I made the bronze bust of Ronald Reagan, I had an American flag that I kept, and we went to the Ronald Reagan to deliver the bronze bust, and I asked the captain, or requested the captain, if he could fly my American flag aboard the Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier. He said yes. So he gave me the flag, and this is the flag.
Nice. Very nice.
And I gave that flag to the Civil Air Patrol squadron.
And you were on the main island in Hawaii, right?
Yes, USArmy, right next to Kona.
Okay.
Kona.
Yeah.
So that was my contribution to that.
Very nice.
Later on, I had a lot of free time. My creative mind just kept flowing. I went to the lava fields, and I'll show you that. I developed dragons and Godzillas. But one of my great things, I went to the USArmy Palace in Honolulu and photographed the plaque that's on each gate. That's the official plaque, the logo of Hawaii. And I photographed, I measured it, took measurements, and I duplicated that bronze plaque this big
Oh gosh.
in bronze.
Mm.
Identical, because I believe in doing it. I gave one to one mayor of Hawaii, and then the other mayor. It's hanging in their office.
Oh, very nice.
Because, well, in fact,
they gave me, let's see,
Oh, they gave you a thank you certificate. Okay, so
they
this
gave,
from the office of the mayor. Very nice.
yes, yes, Mr. Vasquez, I'm writing on behalf of the people of the county of Hawaii to say thank you very much for your gift of a splendid bronze replica of the coat of arms of the Kingdom of Hawaii, Rika 1893, valued at $4,000.
Wow.
As you surely know, this is a great cultural significance because it depicts the Kapu twins, Kame, Ikomuku, and Kamanawa, royal counselors to the king Kamehameha. The twins were born on the island of Hawaii, and they were among the 5 fierce warriors of the Kona during the reign of great Kamehameha the Great. On the coat of arms is the Kamako, who holds the kili. The kili is a staff with the feathers, and the other one holds the spear. It'll be an honor to display this beautiful coat of arms in the mayor's office. We are most grateful for this wonderful, meaningful gesture.
Very nice.
So,
You stayed busy for sure.
yes, and where I'm going, there's the West Hawaii Veterans Cemetery. They did some bronze boots, so I made some bronze boots for the for one section. And then I noticed that the letters on front of the West Hawaii Veterans Cemetery were white. So I happen to have some special reflective tape that lasts 10 years, and I coated the letters with reflective tape.
Oh, no.
When the cars go by the highway at night, they lit up,
Oh, very good.
and that's where I want to be buried.
Very nice.
And so it has ocean breeze and ocean view.
You're also a ham operator?
Yes.
Okay.
When we were, that's another story. When we retired and we had lived in Oakhurst and we were coming back, my wife says, you have to get a job. And there was a lady with a brand new motorhome getting gas. The lady, what's the story of this? She says, oh, I deliver motorhomes. Says, here's the card, go and you can deliver motorhomes and your wife can deliver motorhomes.
Huh.
So we signed up for a year delivering brand new motorhomes from Fontana across mostly in the West United States. And that was a story. But my wife got her ham radio license. I had my ham radio license. And I could communicate. One time we got off the road and I got lost. And I called on the radio, somebody came on my radio. That's before cell phones.
Right.
And it says, Eddie, follow the road that you're on and keep going left. And it put me right back to the highway.
Mhm.
And while we were in Hawaii, we supported the Ironman. Every year, we would go with our ham radios and monitor the traffic. If there was a need for a new bicycle or a chain or whatever, or somebody fell,
Yeah.
we did that. We got a brand new T-shirt every year. So those are the things that I did in Hawaii. Oh yes, and it still exists. We stayed in the village of Waikoloa, Hawaii. The village had no entry sign. Some towns have it says you're entering Hamakua Coast, blah, blah, blah. But our village had no name.
Oh.
So I made a sign without permission, of course.
Uh-huh.
And I put it up there, and it says, E Kobamai, welcome, in Aloha, Waikoloa village. It's still there. And before I left, I made a large 4x8 of a heart, and I put Hawaii on there,
Oh.
and the American flag. No, I put the Hawaiian flag. The Hawaiian flag has the British flag on one corner,
Mhm.
and the 7 stripes with the 7 islands. And I went and put it on. There was no aloha. You go to Hawaii, and there's no greetings to say aloha, welcome to Hawaii. I called the Chamber of Commerce. As the Chamber of Commerce, I have this nice 4x8 that I gave to you. And they said, well, we'll think about it, we'll call you. And then they finally called me and says, Eddie, we can use your sign at a fence, at a factory fence over here. I said, no, thank you. So I took a chance and responsibility myself. Right on the highway, I found a place and I went and placed it up there on the rocks. And as you go in and out, that's the Kona,
Uh-huh.
it's on there, close to the Costco store.
Oh. You're
So,
also a member of the American Legion in Kona?
well, that's true. I joined the American Legion in Kona because they have dinners and they're tied up with the West Hawaii Veterans Cemetery.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah.
So in fact, this trip I'm going to settle my business and because I belong to the Neptune Society.
Mm, okay.
So they'll deliver my ashes there and that's where I want to be.
Can we go back a little bit and talk about space again? You had told me a story about the trained monkey.
Oh,
I
yes.
forgot that. story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before the astronauts got it in capsules and to go to the moon or whatever, they had trained a monkey to operate and do certain things. The monkey learned to do these things, by command. And the thing was to be able for us to record again from ground to pick it up. The only place, the orbits, it goes several orbits. They sent us to Townsville, Australia. That's in the northeast. Yeah, northeast. And the way we were going to do it, was we station the aircraft to the tarmac, run the power, electrical power, run cables from our telemetry receivers to the outside, and they had manufactured a special antenna for us that was assembled. It was by 2x4s, it had a base, it had an elevation. I put a protractor so I could tell what angle it was.
Wow.
And it was just a big copper coil with the antenna, big copper coil like that, which was collapsible. We would stretch it out and put it on the ground and ready for that. Well, we were in Townsville, and what happened was that the monkey died in space. And we felt so bad, so we had to wait for the monkey when we returned to Hawaii.
Oh.
But that it actually happened. Well, another story that was very interesting was called the Pony Express. Before we had satellites taking pictures and sending the video way down and everything, longitude, latitude, we did not have that. The only way that at that time that we had, Vandenberg would launch a camera with recording capabilities and be south-north polar orbit, polar to polar orbit, and the Earth is turning inside this orbit. And the camera would be recording all over the world. The world turns. Well, to get those pictures back, there was a day, so we fly to Hawaii and then head up to Alaska. And we could pick the signal up that it's coming. We radio to Hawaii, the Air Force, and I think they had C-130s. The C-130 was configured with a big fork in the nose, and when the parachute came down and the parachute's floating down, the camera's down here. It was such a long cable. The fork of the 130 would come and get it. The camera would swing to the back of the 130, and they would bring it in.
My gosh.
And that way that they had recordings of that. That was called the Pony Express.
They got the pictures they wanted.
Yes.
Wow.
It was an interesting one. And finally, one of my last deployment was that, you remember those external tanks that on space, the big external tank in the center, the fuel tank, they would usually splash from Vandenberg, no, correction, yeah, from Cape Canaveral, they would splash in the India Ocean. The trajectory would take him that way. Well, they changed the trajectory a little further north, and he would splash 1,000 miles south of Hawaii. And they wanted to videotape that re-entry. Why? Because they wanted to detect, as the battle was burning up, as you may know, that each battle glows and burns with different colors. Your steel, your aluminum, iron, they all put out different color signatures. And we were to photograph that. Now, as a videographer, this was interesting. Our video cameras people were in the back. They communicated with the pilot and co-pilot. The co-pilot was on the right-hand side, and he had a little telescope, just a little one, and he was supposed to keep it within that circle written on the plastic of the window. Oh. So, because once he came over the horizon, they saw it, and he had it trained, and then he was talking to the videographer, and he says, "I got it." And then at that time, the videographer kept talking to the pilot. Come left, come left, come left. So he was tracking. And that's how we did that. Wow. And what was so interesting, this I remember, look it up, it was 1984. And that was my last mission. We finished tracking that re-entry to get the signature of the battle. It just so happened that Kilauea was erupting for the first time in Hawaii. Wow. The pilot says, "Any of you would like to see a volcano erupting?" Wow. Yes. Says, "I'm going there anyway." So we orbited around the volcano. We all took pictures of the volcano erupting. And that was in 1884. The volcano just went dormant maybe about a year ago. Yeah. Wow. Oh, finally, as we left Hawaii, that was my last mission, you know. The plane take off, and the pilot says, "Crew, there's a pod of whales down below." He says, "I'm going to orbit around so you can take another look." What we did, or the technicians did, because that was not my department, but I had the recording part of it. They dropped sonobuoys down there, so we could hear the communications of the whales squealing to each other. So we recorded the sound of the whales
Oh, how cool.
as a farewell.
Wow. Well, since you've been here at Leisure Village, you've started a few clubs, been involved with some clubs. Do you want to share a couple of those,
Yes.
what you've been doing?
Well, when I was approached by two men that had done some research. He says, Eddie, we don't have a veterans club, and we'd like to start one, and we want you to be our president. I said, okay, I'm a doer, go get and do it, you know. So we started a veterans club, and I started thinking, now these were all World War II veterans. So thinking, I said, I'm going to ask something of you. Bring me your ribbons, and I'll catalog them. And as many know, that the ribbons go by rank, the rank of merit. So I collected 45 ribbons. Now, as you can see, that they're about 1 inch by 1/4 inch. I duplicated those in porcelain. I went to the tile company here in Camarillo, and they gave me squares of porcelain, all the colors that I wanted. I got a machine and I sliced it and made it to 1 inch, 5 inch ribbons, duplicated identical as to the ribbons. And they're now presently mounted by the flagpole.
Very nice.
And so that's my farewell. Oh, and I wrote some words to that, and farewell. That you want me to read those, or?
No, we can
Okay.
take a picture of them at the end.
Okay, but those are my words, how I felt about this is a way to remember. And so that was my first club. Then somebody found out that I had ham radio license. We had a ham radio club, and says, Eddie, we want you to be our next president of the.
See, that Toastmaster came in handy.
And well, yes. And another guy and I came up with the idea, during an emergency, we should have ham radio people at each village to report what's happening. So it got started, and it worked out fine till a few years ago, because the association was concerned about liability. We might hurt somebody, or something happened. They wanted no liability, so that took care of that. But then, since I had a motorhome, they asked me to be president of the
RV club.
the RV club, and that was exciting. And because we were in control of the RV, we came up with a place to wash and bringers to wash the club and all that stuff that needed to change the oil. We had a shed. But getting into sort of politics, they were going to take away half of our parking space in the village, because the workers for the gardeners were parking all their cars outside, and they wanted to park inside the RV club. And that's what we went head to head and tangled up. And I went to the city and I said, this is what's happening. He says, no, that's not possible. He said, Leisure Village was built that each house could have a place to put their motorhome, you know, according to vacancies.
Right.
So that is not allowed for anybody else to park in there. So
You won.
we won that case.
Toastmasters again.
What I did, since I like landscaping, I put a pagoda in there and a sign, and I made
Oh, I forgot if it's called a Toro. It's Japanese
Oh, right.
style frame.
Right.
So it was nice, you know.
Oh, okay, so go ahead where you,
Well, after one thing that I would like to recommend any person to join Toastmasters, excuse me, Toastmasters International, because you develop the skills to speak before the public and the proper way of doing it. So I had a lot of confidence in doing that, and it was rewarding to me. So that's about my.
that's-
Any other questions?
well, we thank you for your service. I know, Ed, there's always one last thing, so if you had to say, you know, what the impact of your time in the military was on your life, or your takeaway from the time in the military, do you have something you wanna?
Well, I thank the military for learning discipline and time, and follow orders and take orders and give orders. And your discipline of yourself knows who you are. Like I was saying to Ed, that my mother used to say, "Tell me who your friends are, and I'll tell you who you are." And I was saying to it, I have enjoyed that. My friends were mechanics, I learned that. I have always learned to have friends that are smarter than me, so I can learn from them. And also, I love people. I can relate with people. Now that I've been around, and there's people and they say, "Well, I was born somewhere." I said, "Well, congratulations, you had to be born somewhere." But did I mention the fact? I forgot. I think I lost it already.
Oh,
My hometown, did I mention it was very,
oh, yeah,
very,
did you put that?
my hometown of Laredo, Texas was in Mexico. Laredo was founded in 1755, and it was until 18 something, 90 years later before it came Texas. But Laredo had the Spanish flag, the French flag, and the Republic of Texas, and well, there was a total of 7 flags on that town. They're still flying at the main hotel in Laredo.
Oh, good roots you have,
Yeah.
very good roots. Well, we thank you for your service, Ed.
Oh, it's a pleasure to know, and I, to the future generation, do the best of life. You have a lot to give.
Good.
Don't hold back.
Yeah.
Don't hold back.